Abolition. We have to get politicians, elect politicians who don't want to be politicians. We have to elect community people that hate the very fact that they might be called a politician. We have to elect people to office that don't want to be in office. We have to elect people in office that are solely being put into office because of your faith in them and their integrity. So they don't care what anybody thinks. They're going to take this system apart, and if you don't re-elect them, you're going to have like 5 or 6 or 7 more years of struggle to put it back together again. You see, it wouldn't be so bad if Obama became president and abolished the CIA as it's presently constituted and reestablished a more humane and open intelligence agency, because no one's saying that intelligence agencies shouldn't exist. They do exist. This is the real world. It's geopolitics. You got to deal with that reality. But we know that when Obama became president, he was just an administrator. He was just a manager. And what was he the administrator of and the manager of? Empire. And all of the institutions of empire either assisted or resisted him according to their own agenda and needs. It's much like the tail wagging the dog. So abolition is what we need to think of now. How do we build an abolitionist movement? Well, let's begin at the beginning. People who need housing. Gentrification. What's its origins? What's its impact on poor communities? We begin to see the dynamics of how this begins to happen, how these policies begin to take effect. Then we begin to challenge them. Police, for instance, we have to abolish centralized policing. The Office of Police Chief is solely a bureaucratic organization. A lot of people don't know that most municipal police departments, especially in places like New York and Chicago, started out as gangs, as street gangs. The NYPD started out as an Irish street gang that was given a charter and a commission by Tammany Hall to become the constables or law enforcement officials of metropolitan New York. So there was a time in the development of the New York City Police Department, if you wasn't Irish, you wasn't getting on the police department. And so when Italian immigrants came to New York, they found themselves being beaten in the head, oppressed and shot by the cops. Irish cops. Sounds familiar, right? Beaten in the head, shot, stopped and frisked. Same thing. These were Italians, though. But they resisted. They organized themselves. We call it organized crime. They understood that America was a criminal enterprise. That the U.S. government was organized crime. That the Irish who controlled the police also controlled all the corruption in New York City from Tammany Hall. Also did all of this. And you got to remember, at the time that all of this was happening, it was black folks living in New York. You wouldn't know it, though. There's black folks living in New York. So what was their experience at the turn of the century? We know about Garvey. We see these parades in Harlem. We say, man, that's in Harlem. That's at a time when the police force was 75% Irish. At the rise of Marcus Garvey. Ethnic politics in America is no different than the tribal politics in Africa. The difference is the address and the culture. So if the police started out as a gang and they were institutionalized and legalized by a certain ethnic group to become law enforcement for everybody, and then when other immigrants come along, they challenged that. So they had to include Italians on the police force. And they had to include other immigrant people on the police force. In New York City, it wasn't until the early 1950s that they began to include black folks on the police force. Why at that time? Why? Because the demographics had changed. Because black folks have changed. Because there was a difference now. There was an upsurge in they had changed. But they wouldn't willingly have done this. So now we're at another point in history where we have to challenge the political power of the police because this is a police state. So you can't avoid this challenge. This is a fight that you're going to have to fight. You're going to have to fight the political power of armed agents of the state, because they will kill you. That a civil servant, an idiot civil servant, could take a test today and tomorrow become a cop with a gun on his hip and kill your ass. You are not safe in your home. You are not safe anywhere when armed men could kick your door in and do what they want to you, and then characterize this as a, you know, we had a report there were narcotics in there. You know how many black kids have been killed over a joint, over a piece of marijuana? Killed, murdered. They're not here no more for a joint. Was that it? It was that serious? Smoking weed was that serious? Nah, that's pretext. It's all pretext. So my point is, again, I can't emphasize it. Whatever your discipline is, think outside the box. If you're a black psychologist, if you're going into psychology, think about the colonial mentality. Think about how this mentality has led to where we're at now. So when you stand up and give your presentation, when you look at our children, you begin to understand their situation and what they're confronted with in a different light. Look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself that when you step outside today, who am I? What am I? How would I be perceived? It's very important that you do that. A lot of people don't know what it's like to grow up black in America, and every day that you step out, you have to think about a whole bunch of other stuff, like, you know, if I'm driving, I could get stopped. If I'm walking down the street, I got to do this. I got to walk this way. I can't wear this. I can't do that. And we buy into that because we have a whole generation of black so-called responsible individuals who are more bent out of shape about somebody wearing their pants around their ass than they are about black folks being murdered in the street. They forgot that they used to be youth and they used to rebel too. There was a time when wearing an afro was a sign of not only militancy, but arrogance and black power and everything. So you had a bunch of Negroes that used to wear crew cuts. To show that I'm not down with that. Then we went to dreadlocks, and then we went to cornrows. And we each struggle, what do we have to go through? We have to go through the institution accepting this particular modality of dress or look. You had to file a suit to have dreadlocks. You had to file a suit to have your hair cornrowed if you was a cop. Now you see cops with earrings in their ear, nose pierced, dreadlocks on. You can't tell the pig from people. Everybody looks the same. Everybody looks fly. It's no longer an issue. Why isn't it an issue? Because the people of that day and at that time challenged it. But the problem with this is America as an empire is very unique. It has an ability to absorb a whole lot of change without really changing. It could deal with diversity without changing. Now that's a plus and it's a minus. Because the plus side of that is that you are free to pursue whatever culture, whatever religion, whatever floats your boat, long as it doesn't have a political impact. Once it moves out of that realm and challenges the status quo and the power of privilege, now you're a problem. Look at how the United States is trying to adjust itself. Law enforcement is trying to adjust itself to the legalization of marijuana. They're confounded on how to do this. They got to find something to justify their otherwise useless existence. They got to find something. They didn't bend over backwards like this at the repeal of prohibition. Everybody went out and got drunk together, the police and everybody. They didn't do all of this. But marijuana is a different story. Why is that? Why is that? Look at the history of drugs and immigration and racism in this country, and you'll see why. You'll see why. So now they're trying to figure out how to deal with this. They'll say to you, well, you know, how do you figure out you're driving while you're high? Can't figure it out because they don't have the tools to figure it out. Because if you're a chronic weed smoker, you're more coherent and under control high than you are when you're not. It ain't like you're sloppy drunk, and when you're sloppy drunk, it's sure. I'm all right, officer. I'm all right. But when you smoking weed, it's like, yo, what's up, officer? Everything's cool. ID, you need some ID? Sure. How do you deal with it? So you can't stop the car no more and say, I smell weed. Yeah, you can smell weed, so I smoke regular, officer. Is there a problem?